It's your girl, the grown woman gamer, and today I'm coming at you. Um, you know, I can't even do my normal intro because I just feel so sad right now. I've been thinking a lot about what everyone's talking about, which is the death of George Floyd. If you haven't heard the news, which is unlikely, especially since almost 48 hours have passed, you know that in Minneapolis, Minnesota, an unarmed black man who was under arrest was killed by several police officers, but particularly this one police officer, Derek Chauvin, who knelt on this man's neck and kept his knee on this man's neck for almost 10 minutes. Even after the man stated clearly, even after George Floyd stated clearly that he could not breathe, he called out for his mother. Meanwhile, these dickless police officers stood around and allowed this piece of shit, animal, sadistic excuse for a human being to kill another human being who posed absolutely no threat to any of them whatsoever at that point. And so many things have gone through my head in trying to process this because I don't think we're supposed to be able to process an event like this. It's so tragic and so depressing and so enraging that it's not even supposed to make sense. Our minds are not supposed to make sense of something like this. And I am struggling like so many people I've been listening to. If, you know, I'm going to say something. A few years back, there were all these different killings of black men and women, and so many images that we would be bombarded with that really just disturbed my spirit and my soul. And largely due to the fact that I feel somewhat helpless and not able to do anything constructive to make a difference in trying to stop this from happening. And I just made this decision in order to keep my peace of mind that I didn't want to see these images. I didn't want to watch these videos over and over and over again, to the point where I would avoid social media at times when I knew that I would be encountering these types of images. And when Ahmaud Arbery died, I have to be honest, I have not watched that video from start to finish. And I purposefully tried not to see this video. And even my partner who I live with, I told them, I don't want to see the video. Don't show me the video. I don't want my spirit to be disturbed by seeing such animal brutality and inhumanity. But I could not avoid seeing George Floyd die in the street. I could not avoid it. I've seen the video, I've seen the images probably over 100 times in the last 48 hours. And for all the attempts that I've made to try to just go back to my normal life and do my job and not be distracted, whatever that means. I mean, that's such a pedestrian word to use for the impact that such a horrific event could have on one's psyche, to that I'm distracted by it, you know? I can't get past it. I've been preoccupied with it on and off all day. I'm not trying to say that every waking moment of this day has been filled with thoughts of this crime that I witnessed, this murder, this killing that I witnessed. And that's exactly what it is. There's no getting away from the fact that George Floyd was murdered in cold blood by a man who got joy and some sort of sadistic pleasure from robbing the breath out of this man's body. He enjoyed that. That's what made it so fucking sick. You know, these police killings are inexcusable. We see videos of these police officers in these engagements with black men primarily, and there's a level of fear, a heightened tension and anxiety. But when I watch this video, the cavalier attitude and how casual all of these police officers behaved. It disturbed me to my core. Because sometimes I've sat back and I've said to myself, what would it be like if I was a police officer? And I've made no bones about it. If someone points a gun at my head, I'm going to try to survive the encounter. So I cannot actively always kind of divorce that logic, because my instinct is to try to survive. And that's the reason why I'm not a police officer. These people are supposed to be equipped with the tools and the skills to disarm people without violence. That is supposed to be the number one attribute of a good cop. And you should already have made the decision, I'm not going to kill someone who's not trying to kill me. But they kill us because our black skin is a weapon in their minds. Somehow just the sheer virtue of our brown and black skin is somehow a threat to these idiots. And it brings me, and I'm sorry, I'm just gonna speak what's on my heart. I don't know if all of this is gonna make sense, but there's so many things I've thought about. And today I thought about, like, how do you create a Derek Chauvin? What type of upbringing does a man have as a child that gives him such pleasure in killing another human being? And I thought about white folks and how they choose to raise their children. And the huge mistakes you can make if you want to create a Derek Chauvin or one of any of these other cops who end up killing unarmed black men and women and engaging in these behaviors that just indicate that they have absolutely no humanity whatsoever. And we can have a long conversation about how racism is a disease. We could talk about that all day. How racism is pervasive and it destroys the spirit and it robs people of their humanity. We could talk about that, but the fact of the matter is, if you're white and you're listening to the sound of my voice and somehow this message reaches you and you're raising children and you don't expose them to people other than people that look just like them, have the same experiences as them, then you are treading on dangerous ground, and you very well could create the type of callous indifference and base animal sadistic behavior that we all have witnessed in that video. You have a responsibility to your children if you don't want them to turn out that way. So spare me the thoughts and prayers. Spare me all of these hashtags. Do something different with your kids. Do something different with your seed so that they don't co-sign that behavior and they don't become part of the problem. I'm so tired. They haven't even arrested this man. They have not even arrested this man. What more do you need to see? Do you know that the police report did not mention that he kneeled on the man's neck? That had it not been for these bystanders who taped this incident with their phones, that we probably would not even know how the man died? Allegedly, this cop was involved in other shootings and killings. Here's another really interesting tidbit or suggestion. If you have a police officer that's repetitively involved in the killing of unarmed or even armed people of color, he needs to be investigated. Because Minnesota is a very white place. There are not a lot of black people. I've been there several times, and there are not a lot of black folks, and the black folks that are there, the majority of them are immigrants. They're not African American. Black people are in many ways segregated. The carriage and the demeanor of many black people in Minnesota is very different than what I experienced growing up in the DC area, where black people are extremely proud, extremely bold, and we don't make any apologies for our presence. We're here. This is our space. We own it. DC is Chocolate City. And the type of pride that a lot of black people have when we carry ourselves in this area is very different. And if you live in places like Atlanta and New York and Los Angeles, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. But if you're black and you live in the Midwest, or you live in one of these places where you're isolated and the community that supports you is not very prominent, and you have to integrate in order to survive, it's different. What's the point of what I'm saying? Maybe there's no point, but this is what I want to say. You know, I've had a long, almost 2-year conversation with my partner regarding voting. And there's been a phrase in my mind all day long. And it's largely due to the fact that I'm learning a lot right now about legal contracts. And in a legal contract, there is something called consideration. A consideration is not what you think of when you initially hear the word consideration. Normally, when you hear consideration, you think how we consider others, how we think of others, how we engage with others, and how we put ourselves in their shoes to understand what their experiences are and to try to be sensitive to that and how we deal with others. That is what we normally learn that consideration is. But a consideration in legal terms is something of value that is given to another person. And if a legal contract is binding, there has to be something of value. And that something of value, number one, normally indicates there's going to be something monetary or financial that's given from one party to another. So when it comes down to what we as a people are faced with, we must stop participating in this economy and this government without the consideration of the government giving us something back. We have to demand something. We have to withhold our money. We might even have to withhold our vote. I've had this conversation on this platform before, and I've said I'm not judging anyone that votes because the leadership at the top of this country is so deplorable and so nauseating and so disappointing. I couldn't blame someone for wanting to vote against that in an effort to remove that stain from our history and try to rebuild and get away from that. Because God knows it would take very little to be an improvement from the circumstances that this entire country is living under with this horrible leadership that we've had in these last 4 years. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm coming around to the fact that we cannot accept these crumbs because there's nothing of benefit. There's very little of value. One or two of us get in and all of a sudden they've done the entire black community a great service. One or two of us get a few dollars in our pocket and now they've solved the problem of social and racial inequality. That is not real. What's real is what we saw in that video. That this country has their knee on our fucking necks. They're squeezing the life out of us with a smile on their face. Indignant in knowing that they will not have to pay for those sins. Indignant in the knowledge that they are protected by the system that they work within. That our lives have very little meaning. And we can't accept that any longer. We have to do whatever we can to fight. And it's not just black people who have to fight it. These well-meaning white folks, Asian folks, Hispanic folks, if you believe in this American dream, and you believe that you deserve rights, and you believe that this country is so great, then be honest about what's wrong in this country too, and join in the fight to eradicate this level of injustice, racism, inequality, and let's be honest, inhumanity. What we saw was barbaric. My heart is heavy, but I still have hope. I have to have hope. And I'm just going to say this last thing. I pray that George Floyd, wherever his spirit may be in this universe, can look down upon all the response to his death and know that we will continue to fight so that this doesn't happen again. And when it does happen again, that he and whoever joins him in looking down can know that we are not going to give up until things do change and we as a people and as a community create a world for our children where they can not only just do what's necessary to survive, but also thrive. And we're not going to allow him to die in vain. As ridiculous as it seems because it's said too often, I do send my sincerest condolences to his family, to his children, to his friends, to anyone that knew him and loved him. And we are with you, and we will not forget.